Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. I am somewhat sick today. Woke up with a bit of a sore throat, but that's okay because I made a good cup of tea that should keep me going as we record today's video. I hope, anyways. Today we're going to be talking about a whole slew of anime announcements from new adaptations and finalized release dates before getting to possibly the biggest news, Johnny Young Bosch returns to Trigun. So, without any further ado, I am Tristan Gallant and welcome to Glass Reflection. Let's jam. To start off, we have 3 previously announced anime that now have dates and in some cases, trailers. My teen romantic comedy SNAFU Climax has an OVA that is going to be bundled with a Nintendo Switch and PS4 game from the same franchise. Which means, in more general terms, we, in the West, won't be getting it. Probably. It's not completely unusual for OVAs of this type to be released alongside other type of media. Usually this happens as a way to kind of boost the sales of the media in question. Sometimes it's a new manga or novel that'll come with a disc with the OVA in it. In this case, it's a video game. There's a very good chance that we're never going to see said video game translated and released in North America because most places don't actually see the value in something like that over here, unfortunately. Occasionally, though, the OVAs and that attached to them do see release over here, but we need one of the major streaming services to actually, decide that it's worth it. In this case, since SNAFU has been traditionally released by what is now Crunchyroll, they would need to go out of their way and try and license the OVA separate from everything else. Not to say that they couldn't, nor to say that they won't, but that's the only way that we're actually going to see that thing ever, legally anyway. Psycho Pass Providence, coming out on May 12th. This is a film, which means that the May 12th date is for Japan, not us. We might have to wait a whole nother year. But, some people might not even mind. Psycho Pass Providence is celebrating the franchise's 10-year anniversary, bringing back a lot of the staff that have worked on the franchise over the years. Now, plot details about the film are fairly slim, but what we do know, for absolute certainty, is that series creator Gen Urobuchi does not seem to be involved. Not that I'm surprised. Psycho Pass as a franchise right now has 3 television seasons, Psycho Pass 2, and Psycho Pass 3. There was a film simply called Psycho Pass Movie with no subtitle. I've never been the fan of lack of subtitles. It makes things very confusing. And then there was the film project, Sinners of a System, which is this whole kind of different thing, and apparently we're not focusing on that at all right now. Providence seems to be celebrating the franchise as a whole, but somewhat focusing more on the 3 numbered seasons of Psycho Pass. And the staff of the film seems to align with that. The director for all 3 numbered shows is coming back alongside a decent amount of the writing staff. Again, sans Gen Urobuchi, but Urobuchi hasn't been involved with Psycho Pass, I want to say since the original season, but I also feel like he was involved with the film from a screenplay perspective. Not entirely sure about that. His involvement has always kind of been a little bit more nebulous and not ever officially nailed down, at least not in any translated interviews that I've been able to read. And largely the writing of the franchise has gone on without him, especially for Psycho Pass 2 and Psycho Pass 3. So as far as whenever that's going to come out, we'll have to see. Crunchyroll would be the ones to license it officially in North America, but their whole film section still needs some figuring out in that they haven't told us how things are going to be happening going forward, especially for a franchise like Psycho Pass, which isn't necessarily a giant franchise, a really well-known and popular franchise that they have under their umbrella. And also the 2nd season of the ancient Magus Bride is going to air in the spring anime season on April 6th. This is something that I am personally looking forward to heavily, as I very, very, very much enjoyed the original season, and also the OVAs that came out before the initial season and since the initial season. Season 2 will be covering the college arc of the original story, which in very broad terms seems to be bringing the show into a more school-like setting, for better or for worse. We're gonna have to see. This is also the first official season of Magus Bride to be done over at Studio Kafka. The previous season of The Ancient Magus Bride was produced over at Wit Studio, and from my understanding, Studio Kafka was officially created in order to produce the OVA series for Magus Bride, The Boy from the West, and The Night of the Blue Storm. So now that they are taking over production in totality, it'll be interesting to see what changes in the production we might see coming away from Wit. With any luck, it'll be similar to other shows that have moved away from Wit Studio. For example, Vinland Saga is airing currently in this anime season right now in the winter, and season 1 of that used to be part of Wit Studio. Now it is being done by MAPPA, and it seems to be holding true to the quality of the original season. With any luck, that will also be happening here. Kafka hasn't really had time to stretch their legs as a solo studio, but from what I understand, a lot of their staff are coming over to work on this project, so we'll have to see how that works out as the show airs in April. And we also have announcements for 2 new adaptations. The Girl I Like Forgot Her Glasses is a manga from 2018, which covers a middle school romantic comedy around the premise explained in the title. Female classmate of our protagonist has terrible eyesight. I am not one to generally judge on titles, especially light novel titles, but I'm really interested to see how that is actually going to progress beyond, a couple of loose stories. I only briefly checked out some of the manga chapters recently, mostly because of this announcement, and while it has been a fun and interesting read as far as I have gotten, I haven't yet reached a part where they fully explain the new premise insofar as to why, if this character is so debilitated by the lack of glasses that she allows herself to be put in those situations constantly. Then again, that may be the point, not only for romantic or comedic hijinks, but also because, hey, that's what the story is titled, and it would be very awkward if from past episode 1 she just remembered her glasses all the time. Also, we have the announcement for Mysteries, Maidens, and Mysterious Disappearances. That is an English title that may be subject to change, as they have not given us an official one, and that is just the rough translation of the Japanese title. This one is from a manga from 2019, and it follows a female protagonist who is an aspiring writer, or rather has written in the past, but as she has gotten older has found it harder and harder to continue writing. She is then thrust into a world of paranormal experiences alongside her co-worker and must deal with a variety of curses and demons and other paranormal phenomena. That is a rough description of the manga's plot, but also if you look at the key art and you've known nothing about this series beforehand, you might notice the very obvious other plot that might attract some people. Before you ask, the manga is uncensored. The anime probably will not be so. Now, before we go into our last story of the day, I wanted to give quick shoutouts to the supporters of this channel over on Patreon. This video is not sponsored, and the more support that we get, the less sponsors that Glass Reflection will need to have at any given time. So an immense thank you, especially to patrons like City Yamako, Rife and Bonaparte, Ross Emerson, Omar Showman, Hector Montemayor, and Wago221. We cannot continue this without your support, so however much you are able to support via Patreon, I am eternally grateful. Lastly, Johnny Young Bosch returns for Trigun Stampede. Crunchyroll has announced that the actor is returning to voice the humanoid Typhoon in the brand new CG adaptation by Studio Orange. Now, Johnny Young Bosch has been the only voice for Vash since the dub of the original series back in 2000, I want to say. The original Trigun came out in Japan in like the late 90s, but by the time it came over here, I think it was the new millennium. And while this announcement does come with the release date for the English simulcast, January 21st, it does not, however, come alongside with any other announcements about the rest of the cast, which honestly, I'm not surprised. Allow me to make some speculations as to why this is the case. They are pulling a Badlands Rumble. So personal opinion time. I love Johnny Young Bosch and his take on Vash. I feel like Trigun, the original Trigun, and its dub is one of the best of its era. I think that Johnny Young Bosch's portrayal of Vash the Stampede is probably one of the best, how should I say, vocal adaptations in dubbing history. Again, personal opinion, I love his take on the character. He is so popular as Vash that when the film that followed the original series, Badlands Rumble, was released a while back, I can't remember the exact year offhand, when it was released, he was the only dub voice actor to actually be brought back. Funimation, when it still existed, was the one to handle that release, and while they did go out of their way to bring Johnny Bosch back to voice Vash, nobody else returned. It was actually a little bit of a hubbub some of the voice actors in question, but we're not going to get to that. For me, this seems to be the exact repeat of that. Chances are Johnny Bosch is going to be the only voice that returns from any Trigun previously. I doubt we're going to see anybody else from the original 2000s dub. I doubt we're going to see anybody else from Badlands Rumble. And the reason for that is because, having seen the first episode of Trigun Stampede, all of the characters involved are not really the same characters from the old Trigun. Trigun Stampede very much feels like a new adaptation. It's a new take on the story that previously exists without necessarily being tied down to what has actually occurred in the previous material. We're not following the same story as the original 90s anime. We are not following the same story as the manga, Trigun Maximum. The characters may exist, but everything seems very, very clearly different. Like just the fact that Millie isn't even a character anymore, and the insurance girls are essentially gone, and Meryl, instead of being an employee for the Bernardelli Insurance Company, is now a journalist for the Bernardelli newspaper. Little weird. And more importantly, the feeling I got from the first episode, and I'll probably elaborate on this in a video in the future, is that this Vash is different. Purely in how the show has been portraying him, purely in how the show has introduced him to the audience, assuming you've never watched any Trigun before, this Vash feels like a very different character. In Japanese, all of the voices are different. They never bothered bringing anyone back, which normally is a very clear sign that this is a different character. Far more often with Japanese voice actors compared to North American voice actors, they go out of their way to keep the same people, the same voice throughout multiple different adaptations and mediums, unless it is supposed to be a fresh new take, which is what I assumed Studio Orange was doing. The fact that Johnny Yong Bosch is being brought back in is trying to directly tie it back to the old medium, at least as far as the English dub is concerned. And personal opinion, as much as I love Vash, I, again, do feel like Johnny's take on Vash is one of the best that has ever been done in anime dubs. I do wish they recast him for this because I don't think it's the same character. I don't think it's supposed to be the same character. And no matter how much you would tell Johnny to do it differently, or no matter how much he will just naturally do it differently because it's been 20 years since that original dub, there is still that connection there. And it'll be very hard for me to watch his Vash and not immediately continue comparisons with the old series, which I feel like does this new adaptation a disservice. This new adaptation, I feel like can and should stand on its own without constant comparisons to the old material, and that's going to be very hard to do when the dub is going out of its way to make that connection for us. So for those that are looking forward to hearing more Johnny Yong Bosch as Vash, great. I hope you are going to enjoy that. I'm probably also going to enjoy that as much as I am being a little bit of a curmudgeon about it, but also I feel like I'm not going to go out of my way to watch the dub purely because he's in it and he's the only one in it. If they brought back everyone, or at least any characters that are shared between both of the dubs, that might be a little bit of a different story, because then it'll be a little bit more of a nostalgia trip rather than just the one character. But beyond that, I think I'm going to be sticking to the Japanese for the time being. I'll have more thoughts on that probably in a dedicated video to come out later this month or early next. So look out for that. And with that, we've reached the end of our show today. We've been able to cover a bunch of things throughout this week, and barring any downturns in my health or just a lack of good things to talk about, we should be back next week with even more. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, watch more anime and stay frosty.